Hi everyone, my name is Ben Kirsten, and in this video, I'll be walking through my Wwise and Unity implementation for the Rollerball game. For those of you unfamiliar with the game, this is a free project you can download from the Unity Assets Store, and when you do, this is what it looks like. You can hear there is no sound, you roll this ball around, you collect all the cubes, and eventually, you win. Alright, here we are in my modified version of the game. There are now on-screen controls for main volume, music, and sound effects, as well as a new health text parameter, and a singular red cube. I'll go ahead and play for a minute so you can hear the sounds, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so let's talk about the difference in gameplay, and then we'll dive into the audio side of things. The way this works is you start off with a health of 50, and each time you run into a red cube, you lose 10 points of health. This cube that is currently red is considered the boss cube, and you have to collect all other cubes before you can collect this boss cube. Once you collect the first cube, all cubes will alternate between red and yellow. Yellow meaning that you can collect the cube and your count goes up. Red meaning that you will get an error and lose 10 points of health. And if your health reaches 0, then all the cubes come back. So the idea of the game is that you have to collect all these cubes without running into a red cube too many times before you can collect this boss cube and eventually win the game. Okay, so let's dig in a little further here, and we'll start by looking at this audio manager script. Now, this is where all of my Wwise RTPCs are. I have some test tones, my music, and all of my general sound effects, and finally a whoosh. All my events also have this debug checkbox, so I can individually turn sounds on or off as needed. All my objects in Unity that need to make a sound or modify a sound talk to this audio manager. It just lets me keep all my audio in one place and stay organized. Okay, so let's look at a few things here. We've got main, sound effects, and music volume. Main. Let's get some music going here. Okay, let's turn the music back. Turn the sound effects all the way down. Okay, bring the sound effects back. Turn the music up. Turn the whole mix down a little bit. All right, you get the idea. Next up, we've got ball velocity. That's tracking the velocity of the ball, and that's tied to the volume of the ball rolling sound effect, as well as some cutoff filters. It's also driving some aspects of the music, and it's talking with this wall hit event here. So if the ball's rolling real fast and we hit the wall, it's louder and sharper. And if the ball's moving slower, then it's softer and more muffled. All right, next let's look at pickup pitch. Now this was inspired by this game, Peggle Blast, and this article on the Audio Kinetic website. They talk about how they wanted the sound of the player's weapon to always be in key with whatever chord is currently being played in the music. So they have these markers in Wwise These get sent to Unity through a callback. Unity reads these markers and makes some decisions, sends some information back to Wwise. Wwise then pitches the player's weapon accordingly, and everything stays in key with the currently playing chord. So I took that same concept and I said that whatever chord is currently being played in the music will determine what note you hear when you collect one of these cubes. And every chord has a pool of 3, 4, maybe 5 possible notes that it can choose from. And that just keeps things interesting and keeps the variation going and makes it so that it's never the same twice. So I'll demo this a few times and you'll hear that the first time you collect a cube, it is always a C note. And then after that, we'll get into some variations. All right, let's go again. And let's go one more time. All right, so there you go. Next, let's look at count control, and this is tied to our count here, and this is determining which tracks are currently playing back. So as you play the game and your count goes up, more, or shall we say different tracks start to play back. And then of course, if your health reaches 0, those tracks go away and you get another sense that the level is starting over. Next, we can see we have some states for our music. We start the game with a music state of none. When we collect the first cube, we move to the first state. When we collect the last cube, we move to the last state. Here's our callback. This is how we're sending the information from Wwise to Unity to let Unity know what chord is currently being played. Next, we've got kind of all our general sound effects here, and we can talk about this one, pickup error. Now, this is the sound you hear whenever you run into a red cube and lose 10 points of health. This also has a duration callback, and the reason for this is because as far as Unity is concerned, whenever you collide with one of these red cubes, you might collide with it 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And the way that Wwise was set up was, even though you're only hearing the sound once, it was still triggering the event 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And so what was happening is I would collide with one of these cubes and my health would go down, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And so my way around that was to use a duration callback, so as to say if the event lasts long enough, meaning that if you actually hear the sound, then reduce 10 points of health. Next, we can look at this whoosh here, and I'll go ahead and turn everything off except for the wall hit, the ball rolling, and the whoosh. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear that if the velocity of the ball goes fast enough, we get a subtle whoosh. So it's just another way to add some more to the sound and a little more interactivity to the player's input. You can see I'm using an action on event to stop the whoosh, and that's because I needed the whoosh to stop if it hit the wall. I also needed the whoosh to stop if the ball's velocity fell below a certain threshold, and I wanted to make sure it would stop if it ran into one of these red cubes. Okay, so here we are in the Wwise project, and we'll look at a few things. Here's the count control RTPC. This has a range of 0 to 12 because we have 12 cubes. Pickup pitch, you see, has a range of -14 to +14. This is tied to the note that you hear when you collect a cube, and this just says that it can be pitched as far down as 14 semitones or as far up as 14 semitones. Here are all of our events. You could see all these in the audio manager earlier. And here's our audio tab. Here's the master bus that has our RTPC for volume, and this is what's tied to the sliders in Unity. Same thing with the music and sound effects. Here's all my general sound effects. They're all housed in blend containers, and it just makes for a nice, neat workflow. So let's look at a few of these sounds. Here's the sound of the boss pickup. Here's the sound of the boss twisting. Here's our pickup note, and we'll look at this more later. Here's the pickup UI sound. Here's pickup error. This is the sound you hear when you run into a red cube. This is what you hear when the game restarts. Here is the ball rolling. Here is the sound of the regular cubes as they twist. Here is our wall hit. And here's our whoosh. Now I'll play this a few times and you'll hear that it's different every time, and that is mainly driven by this envelope that has some randomization on the attack time, so it fades in a little bit differently each time, and there's also some pitch and volume going on. Okay, so here's our MIDI note, and this is what is tied to this pickup note, and when I adjust my pickup pitch, all right. And then we've got our main music loop. You can see my markers here. This is what gets sent to Unity to let Unity know what chord is being played. I have some tracks here. I also have some subtracks to keep things interesting. The volume here is tied to my count control. I'll play this a few times and run through this so you can hear it changing. All right, so I thought I'd touch on this real briefly. I did the music and sound effects for the game in Nuendo, making use of this Game Audio Connect feature. So the way this works is that it talks to my Wwise project and it sees what I have selected. So right now it says main loop, and if I select rolling, it says rolling. If I select pickup note, it says pickup note. And this just means that whatever I drag into this window will populate into Wwise inside whatever object I have selected. You can see I also have a cycle marker up here and some regular markers down here. And these show up in Wwise as the cycle marker equals your pre and post roll points, and the regular markers come in as the user cue markers. Super slick workflow. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like or subscribe if you found this interesting or useful. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.